Hey everyone, it's Zahara Stars with Illum Astrology. I wanted to talk to you guys now about Saturn and SYNASTRY. But first I'm just going to give you a little introduction to Saturn. In astrology, Saturn points to justice, prudence, concentration, caution, maturity, restriction. Well, negatively, it's restriction, obstacles, delays, and that can all lead to isolation. Saturn brings delays. It slows things down. It can lead to despondence and hopelessness. So in some ways, Saturn is an indicator of the degree of success that one may achieve in life, or the degree of the relationship that one may have, or what one is able to give to a relationship in terms of synastry. Saturn is the taskmaster, and he judges us for our actions. And so in synastry, Saturn can be judgmental. The person, in a sense, is acting Saturn towards you, or it's like a Saturn transit to the relationship. So depending upon the planet that Saturn is aspecting, you will feel these effects from some degree to another, okay? Of all the effects I was telling you, such as caution and obstacles and delays and, and in the negative stuff of despondence and hopelessness, blockages of expression and stuff like that. But positively, it refines, perfects through its judgment, through its critical eye. But Saturn always requires hard work, why he's called the taskmaster. And you got to put in the work for the relationship to work. Now, often Saturn is the more critiquer or the restrictor within the relationship, while the planet person is trying to often open up the Saturn person to becoming more flexible, easygoing, because another thing that Saturn is serious and represents maturity and old age. So if the person is balanced in their Saturn, and they're not coming across as the negative way of Saturn by being critical, judgmental, suppressive, or any of those things, then the Saturn person can help build you, refine you, perfect you, mature you, by not letting you give into all sorts of whims. There's a sort of restriction there to have boundaries as far as what's acceptable and what's not. So often with the conjunctions in Saturn, these are fated or past lives, because Saturn is the lord of fate as well, and especially in the conjunction. The squares and the oppositions attract a lot. Actually, all of Saturn attracts because we look up to him. He rules the 10th house of legacy, fame, career, prestige. So we often look to the Saturn person or look up to the Saturn person. This is often seen in an older, younger partnership, depending upon which one is the Saturn person. Typically, the Saturn person is the older one, but if not, the Saturn person can be the more mature one. But there's a lesson to be learned with Saturn, and a lot of it has to be about being consciously aware of our behaviors, our actions, being in control, to make sure that we don't lose face, we do the right thing. Again, Saturn rules this 10th house. So there's a lot of patience, diligence, and industriousness that comes with this, along with virtues, and what's right and wrong, and, doing the conventional or having a conventional approach to relationships, which can for some be lacking in that Pluto passion or that Neptune fantasy, illusions, you're my dream lover. Saturn is what you see is what you get. This is it. This is, and there's work involved, and there's life has, we have jobs, we have responsibilities, we have a reputation that we have to maintain. So Saturn relationships help us grow up, mature, but can also make us a bit bored or I don't want to say bored, but yes, Saturn relationships for some can feel boring or routine because it's just, everybody's doing their part in the relationship. There's a lack of luster and a lack of passion or things like that. There can be. Now, if the astrology is very complex, okay, so we can't just assume a relationship off of one placement or one aspect with Saturn. What it does is it creates the flavor of the relationship. So like if you have other aspects that are much more playful and fun and romantic and a little bit of Neptune, then this aspect can be fabulous. It just helps show a commitment, a dedication to the relationship, and a seriousness and a responsibility to each other. But negatively, because there are positives and negatives to all of the planets and their aspects. And typically when it's in a harder aspect, a square or an opposition, it shows that there's a strong chance of that energy of that planet being wrongly used in the more negative form because it's an imbalance between it. Now, that all depends on whether or not the Saturn person is negatively afflicted by Saturn, meaning oppositions and squares with Saturn in their own chart, and why the analysis of a relationship revolves around so many different things. And to be able to depict whether or not a relationship is going to last most certainly cannot be depicted by one aspect. But the general overview is that, Saturn will help the two of you take the relationship seriously. Okay, it means there's responsibility to each other, but there's also resistance or restrictions in just letting go and letting be. There can be a suppression. If with the sun, it can be a suppression on the personal identity, a blockages or something, but it doesn't have to be negative. Let's say, for instance, the sun person isn't very responsible and, forgets commitments and forgets, whatever stuff, just not responsible. Or too rowdy or too crazy or too, something that's not socially acceptable according to Saturn, then the Saturn person can restrict the sun person. Like, say, quiet down, don't laugh so loud, don't do this so much, don't do this, and, sit up straight, and all this stuff can happen as an example. When it's with Venus, a hard aspect, a square or an opposition, it can be turn down the music or disagreements in art or disagreements and, keep the music at regular volume. Don't do this so loud. Don't be so affectionate. You're always all over me. I don't like it. It can be that kind of resistance and blockages. And then it makes the Venus person or the planet person feel bad or feel wrong or feel judged. And that's how Saturn acts. And the same thing goes with the moon. It's like, don't be so emotional. I'm not so emotional. Don't be so emotional. Or emotions aren't expressed as easily. But it does show positively the dedication and the commitment. And usually these two people can learn a lot from each other. Saturn can learn to relax by the planet or to be more expressive or to express more love or to open up and become more spontaneous, enjoy life a little, loosen up. And the planet person can learn to have balance and to learn to express what's important and to learn about responsibility and other things in life and maturity and and, can perfect and refine their skills. I mean, there's just a lot of different areas depending upon the planet. But that's the overall census of how Saturn acts in synastry. It acts as the teacher, the grown-up person, the older person. Sometimes it can be the bah humbug person, the negative person, the one that's like, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. He's known as like the strict father. And it can play both ways for women and men. But that's typically how Saturn works. Now, Saturn is very important in terms of relationships and their longevity. There has to be some Saturn aspects. Preferably, we like them to not be squares and oppositions. However, we all like to learn, and we sometimes are challenged by somebody that's so different than us. So it can definitely work, and you transform as a result of your relationship. But if it's feeling too suppressive and you're feeling like it's negative and the person's putting you down or not being positive for you, not helping you in the positive Saturn form of, I think you should do more of this and that rather than, what you're doing is stupid or, that type of thing, because that's just unnecessary, then the relationship can be very healthy and very balanced. But you have to be the judge of how Saturn is playing out in your relationship and if it's being more hurtful than helpful. And I'll leave that to you guys to decide. But yeah, we'll just about wrap it up for now on Saturn and synastry. I will be doing a lot more, so do check back. If you haven't subscribed, please do to get the latest of all my uploads. And if you'd like a personal relationship reading or just to read about astrology, you can go to my site at www.illumastrology.blogspot.com. All right, thanks so much for joining me, and I'll talk to you all soon.